Good morning. My name is Sara Gorham. I am a licensed prayer practitioner here at Light in the Mountains, and it is my great gift and pleasure to invite us all to take this moment to be centered in our knowing, in our prayerfulness, and our experience of the divine. And I invite us to rest in our heart center, in that place of knowing, in that place of communion where we know Spirit not as an idea, but as a felt presence, as a presence of love, acceptance, connection, community, joy, and abundance in all things. And so I know and I invoke that presence as I give thanks for this gathering this morning, for our celebration of fellowship, for all who are gathered here and all who come together to make this service a possibility that we can create and share into the infinite. I give thanks for Arel, his wonderful music, his wise words, for Bert and all the Leadership Council, for Reverend John and Reverend Jill, and for all the work they do throughout the week, and for John's words of wisdom this morning. I give thanks for my fellow practitioners, and most of all, I give thanks for the light that is Light on the Mountains. And so for all these blessings, we give thanks, together we celebrate, and together we say, and so it is. I don't know how many of you read Reverend John's blog this week, but I thought it was a particularly good one, as they often are. So I come from a family of activists. My father was a liberal legislator in a conservative Republican state. My mother lobbied on many issues, including the destigmatization of mental illness. My sister is a lifelong labor activist, and my brother volunteers full-time on climate change issues. Amid all of this high-profile, high-energy political activism, I have often felt like the family underachiever. Though throughout my years I have marched or picketed for one political issue or another, my foundation and my calling is ultimately more spiritual than political. You could call me a spiritual activist. What is spiritual activism, you might ask? What does that look like? To tell you the truth, it often doesn't look like much. And the reason it doesn't is that it's not so much grounded in doing as in knowing and being. The good news is anyone from anywhere can be a spiritual activist at any time. Where a political activist might march, picket, or protest, or write a letter to their congressperson, here are some things a spiritual activist might do. You could expand your consciousness so that the God in you truly sees the God in everyone. For when we see with the higher awareness of the divine self, all that is beheld clearly exists within that divinity. You can know yourself and all those around you as spiritual beings having a human experience, realizing you don't have a soul, but that you are one. The body and personality that we so identify with is the passing experience that the eternal soul is having. You can let that realization reorder how you see yourself, the world, and its events. You can recognize angry perpetrators of violence as kindred souls, albeit souls in torment, living with the burden of a darkened heart. And you can hold their heart to your heart and offer them light. For where hearts are darkest, the need for light and love is greatest. Rumi, the 13th century Sufi poet, said, "Be a lamp or a lifeboat or a ladder. Help someone's soul heal. Walk out of your house like a shepherd." You could do that. Though the things I have suggested can be a challenge to master and practice, I am well aware that it is often assumed that to be is not sufficient, that we need to pray and move our feet. And I would be the first to acknowledge that all of the above ways of being and knowing that I've just suggested can be practiced while engaging in other kinds of activism. It does not have to be an either-or choice, but I do know that everything begins in consciousness, and that unless and until consciousness changes, nothing will fundamentally change in our outer world. This is just as true in our collective experience as it is in our personal lives. We can pass legislation or vote someone in or out of office, but if we continue to see each other as either them or us, as friend or foe, my party or the other party, we will continue to create division and discord, and we will be the makers of our own misery. These are disconcerting times. It's easy to feel paralyzed in the face of the strangeness of events. But to move beyond paralysis and to move us truly forward, first in consciousness, I call on all of us to consider some spiritual activism. We can start at our center and in our grounding within spirit, knowing we can never be separate from God nor from each other. We can be curious about those we don't understand. We can practice compassion. We can start with the most fundamental truth of existence, that we are all one, all connected, and yes, all wounded, but here to learn, and that regardless of appearances, we are here to learn together. And now, our affirmation for the month, which is somewhere on the screen you're looking at, I think. I embrace the sacredness and unlimited potentiality of the new year. En español, abrazo lo sagrado y la potencialidad ilimitada del año nuevo. And now, music from RL.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you out there. I'm so happy that you're with us today. Well, I think it is so appropriate and a good irony that we are commemorating Martin Luther King Jr. this month. But as I thought of this, I think it's time for us to commemorate the real person, because we've created a person who's Martin Luther King. It's very safe to quote Martin Luther King today. And if you have ever been to the mall at Washington, D.C., our capital, there is an amazing monument to him and this truly larger-than-life statue of him that just makes him out to be this icon that how could he have ever been in human form? I mean, it is a moving experience to see it, but what we forget in how safe it is now to quote him and honor him, how that was not the case during his lifetime. That he was a very controversial figure to promote nonviolence and to protest in a nonviolent way, to bring social change into the world. And of course, during the 60s was a time similar to right now, where great social change was happening, and it was happening very rapidly. And even though today, from any number of faith communities, he will be quoted this month, you might not find it so much in the mid-60s. Again, he was someone to be suspicious of in some corners of the world, and to really worry about, and what was he really representing. And it's so interesting how not my personal view of what I thought he was in the 60s, but how he was presented to me through my parents and their friends, who would often be sitting around the kitchen table, in the evening playing cards or Scrabble or Monopoly or any other things they did, and to hear their voicing of just all things during that period, of how their whole way of life, at least the way that they were raised, being born in the 1920s and coming of age in the 1940s, their life was being challenged, or at least they saw their life being challenged, and they were really feeling up against the wall. And at that time, there was, like today, so many conspiracy theories and false stories going around. And I remember my father giving his summation of the work of Dr. King, that he was someone that would go to big crowds, incite them to violence and looting, and then get in his car and go to another group and do the same thing. Interesting, isn't it? Of course, that's not even close to being true. But those are the kind of stories that were around then. Similar stories that are going on now. So much false information that are going. But I remember around those dinner table things, and the great thing one of the things that I admire about my parents is that the kids were always allowed to be in the room. That we weren't like sequestered off, and we did a lot of observing. And I remember at those times around the table, my mom was always really very quiet. And she started a couple times particularly confiding in me that in the midst of this craziness around the Scrabble board of who Dr. King was, she would say, I think everything I've been taught is not true. You know, it was just like this inner awakening. And it seems like she may have not had friends that she could confide in that with, that she had to tell her 8-year-old son. Was I the only ear that she had at that time? So it's difficult to find the courage to speak the truth when there's so much craziness going on. And as we were called to do that at that time, we are called to do that in this time. And it's not easy. In fact, it's so much easier to just be silent, to just hope that, you know, things will pass over. But we are in a moment of living history. We really are in living history. And what we do, say, and embody and believe is going to change the course of that history. I was reminded of a quote from Michelle Obama this week. And this quote was really, I think, voicing, I guess, an opinion of what she observed about her husband, our former president, Barack Obama. And she said, being president doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. Now, I have not used this quote in a sense for me to personally judge any particular president, even the current one that we have now, but I always looked at that as something very insightful to say that when something big happens in your life, that in a sense it reveals who you are, at least at the moment. The person that through your beliefs and actions and habits have become. Because in our times of great stress, it really comes out of the totality of what we've accumulated as human beings. And that moment, like I said, the good, bad, and the ugly comes out. We all like to think that in moments of great stress that we will really always arise to the occasion and find courage within us and do the right thing. But often we don't. And that's part of the human condition. So rather than to say that I just feel so at a loss for why I haven't stood up in a bigger way right now, the whole point of revealing is to put a light on something. It's, in a sense, we are not stuck in that this is who you are, and this will be who you will always be, at least in your opinions and actions and how you show up in the world, that to have something revealed, and even if it's something you don't like, is a very sacred moment. It's a time that you can make a change. And so this is a time of great revelation. And of course, first, even revealing, I guess, who Martin Luther King really was, I found some less common quotes, less prettier quotes for us to look at. It says, the limitations of riots, moral questions aside, is that they cannot win. And their participants know it. Hence, rioting is not revolutionary, but reactionary, because it invites defeat. Another one, the ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort or convenience, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy. And he wanted to say, I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that the unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. And lastly, he says, the old law about an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. The time is always right to do the right thing. So as we reveal ourselves right now, I think at the core of this is to do the right thing. To resist blinding each other in a downward spiral and looking at doing it differently. And you know what? It's so easy to say things like that when things are just kind of plodding along, kind of okay. Aren't they? It's so easy to say, gee, how would I have been in a major time in history? I just know I would have risen to to the heights and known that the presence of the divine lives in all things, and I'm going to see that in everyone I come in contact with, regardless of with who I meet. But yet, boy, when you're caught up in history, that's the revelation. That's the work, shows where the work needs to be done. That there's a higher calling in times like now, regardless of what you see other people are doing. So what are we being called to do? I read a great opinion piece by in the Deseret Times this week by Boyd Matheson. And part of what he wrote, he said, "We must have the courage to call out hate in all its forms, including contempt, anger, prejudice, and even petty social and media slurs. In the absence of courage, hate leads to a place where fear and frustration ferment into rage and even violence. Every American must call out hate for what it is and do their part to advance meaningful conversations and elevate their dialogue. We must have the courage to not consume or be consumed by any person, politician, celebrity, publication, news outlet, or social media platform peddling contempt and hate as the answer for those we disagree with." And he went on further to quote Adlai Stevenson, saying, "What counts now is not just what we are against, but what we are for. Who leads us is less important than what leads us. What convictions, what courage, what faith." So our moment of great revelation, again, it is important, of course, who we elect in our government, but it is more important what vision is leading us as individuals. What ideals for our country and our families are we allowing to take hold right now? That, it's funny, the voting is almost the last thing we do. There's so much that leads up to that, so much character building, so much introspection of what we want communally as a country, that then we come to the conclusion of who we are going to call forth as our leaders. So it's just not a matter of voting who we think will do best and then going about with our lives. It's about continually this interactive going within and looking at what has been revealed and having the courage to shift that which we don't like, that what we're seeing. St. Thomas Aquinas is quoted as saying, "Always preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words." Let me just let that sink again. Again, this is above a spiritual scripture you might find personally meaningful. It says, let me read this again. It says, "Always preach the gospel, when necessary, use words." Remember growing up, one of my father's favorite sayings, he actually had some good ones, was, talk is cheap, put your money where your mouth is. In other words, we can all talk. We can all express outrageous opinions or great opinions or say any number of things, but what is your investment? That's what that, put your money where your mouth is. What is your investment in your life? What is your investment in your country? What is it that you're willing to put your whole being, forth with as we look at who we are as a nation right now, as we look at who we are as a country right now and who we are as families and communities? What is your investment? What is beyond just, passing on something you read on the internet or on Facebook or any number of informational things that are going around that may or may not have any substance? And what is your personal investment? What are you willing to get behind? I mean, really, what are we willing to put our whole consciousness into as we ask these big questions about our country? As we are probably in one of the most revelatory moments in our country right now. Everything has come up, again, the good, bad, and the ugly, that which we agree with, that which we love, that which we appreciate, and that we are just at a loss for wondering how it got there. It's all for us to look at. And it starts, even as Sarah was saying, conversation. It starts with stop seeing everyone as enemies. And it really starts often with your own family. There's so many heartbreaking stories right now with family members pitted against other family members. In fact, I've had some people say, God, I'm so lucky. Everyone in my family is on the right page or the same page. And that's not the case where it is. There are heartbreaking things happening in their family. I just had a conversation with my sister a couple weeks ago, and we were discussing someone in our family that we're very troubled with, someone who has just been overwhelmed with conspiracy theories and just, which seems to us, in our opinion, a complete madness. And what do we do, in a sense? And so many people's reaction right now is just, cut the cord. Those people in our family are lost right now. But my sister said something that I thought was amazing. She says, I'm not going to let a political opinion destroy our family. I don't know how long it'll take, but we're going to stay with them. We have to do this. We have to do this. So what does that mean? Maybe for a while you just kind of let it float out there. It doesn't mean that you confront them in a way they're not ready to be confronted with. It does mean for the time being that you just love them. And I don't know what action you take after that, but right now in our family is you just love them and know that there will be something better revealed in this for our family. And this isn't the first time, in a sense. For many years, my brothers and sisters and I were estranged from my dad. In fact, didn't have a conversation for him for about a 12-year period. And there was a decision to be made. Do we try to reunite our family? And it was actually from outreach from our dad at that time. And I remember thinking, it would be so much easier if we didn't. Really. Life just seems so much more peaceful without him in our family. Remember, this is the guy that had the story about Martin Luther King, which is just the tip of the iceberg. So it might give you an idea of what we were estranged from. But we just couldn't let it go. We set certain guidelines and parameters and boundaries for my brother and sister and I to work with. But seeking healing in our family was important. And as I look back, even with the craziness of still my dad, and we could sit down and have a lot of stories to tell you, it was so worth it. And especially at the end of his life and some things that we shared. Oh my God, I can't imagine having missed out on that. So we have to love our families. We have to love our communities. We have to love our country and all its flaws right now and not retreat to our own corners and our own stories. And I can't tell you step by step how to do this. There will be a lot in our learning right now as we seek to grow out of what has been revealed. In some ways, it's almost like uncharted territory. I don't know how we are to take these next few steps. But it starts in the belief that there are no lost souls and there are no lost causes. It starts in the belief to know that there is a level that we are all connected and communicate with in the presence of the divine. And that if nothing else, if we keep that thought alive, we will be shown a way. I think with all the craziness that's going on in the world and our country right now, we have the opportunity for it to be a great learning and transformational moment. And it's not something that's going to change overnight. But within this is the idea that something amazing is possible if we're willing to let it happen. If we're willing to show up, if we're willing to tell the truth within ourselves of how we have participated in this country and our families and our communities up to this point. It is a time of great revelation that we are called to participate in. And I think it's been a long time coming. I think it ultimately will be really good for us as a community and as a country. But we have to continually point ourselves and ask ourselves, how am I showing up? What is in my heart as I show up? How am I when I am with people in my family or our community that, in my opinion, seem to be truly lost? How do I have compassion for them? How do I keep my door open to a certain extent to them? Not easy, is it? Really isn't. I think we like to think that religious or spiritual growth is this rarefied event that will happen on a retreat in the Himalayas. Now, it's going to happen in your families. That's how it's going to happen. It's going to happen in your neighborhood. It's going to happen in the country. It's not going to happen in a rarefied moment in the Himalayas. This is the most spiritual moment that you can be right now. And it takes a determination to allow it to happen through you and everything that you do. Just one more thing I want to share with you that it's one of my favorite excerpts from the writings of Ernest Holmes, from the Sermon by the Sea, something he delivered in Pacific Beach, California, August of 1959, a few short months before he had his passing. And he said, "Find me one person who is for something and against nothing, who does not condemn others out of the burden of their soul, and I will have found an exalted human being. Find me one person who no longer has any fear of the universe, or of God, or of humankind, or of anything else, and you will have brought to me someone in whose presence we may sit, and fear shall vanish as clouds before the sunlight. Find me someone who has given all that they have in love, and I will have found the lover of my soul. Is not this true? Why? Because they will have revealed to me the nature of God and proved to me the possibility of all human souls. Find me one person who can get their own littleness out of the way, and they shall reveal to me the immeasurable magnitude of the universe in which I live. Find me one person who knows how to talk to God, really, and I shall walk with them through the woods, and everything that seems inanimate will respond. The leaves of the tree will clap their hands. The grass will grow soft under them. Find 1,000 people who know that and use it, and the world will no longer be famished. How important it is that each one of us, in their simple way, shall live from God, to God, with God, in God, and to each other. That is why we are here, to create a vision and an inspiration, something beyond a hope and a longing, that the living Spirit shall through us walk anew into its own creation, and a new glory come and a new dawn." Let's just be quiet with that for a moment. I simply give thanks in knowing that it is not only possible, but it is so. And so it is.